Hey folks, welcome back to the Transplant again today. My name is Jim Merle, and this video right here is responsible for 99% of the views on this channel. Well, maybe not quite that, but a ton of views on this channel. And today I'm going to go back and watch it for myself for the first time in several years and try to decide if it was actually true or maybe it was all a fake. Stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to become part of the Transplant Helper community. So again, the big question today is that video actually fake? Did I make it up? Are there some things that I said in the video that are actually not right? That's what I'm going to be investigating today. Now, the way I've determined to do this is very simple, and that is I'm going to pull the video up on my screen right over here. I'm going to watch it for myself the first time in over 2 years, and I'm going to go through and kind of fact check things. You know, we live in a world where fact checking is just kind of a part of life, so why not fact check my own video, my own information, to see if I can still stand by that after all this time, or if I need to make some different recommendations, some adjustments, or maybe even some retractions. So with that said, let's go ahead and pull the video itself up here on the screen, and we're going to go ahead and just hit play on it. We're going to basically play through it, and I'll comment as we go. So let's get started. Let's listen to the very first part and see what I was trying to claim.
I want you to look really, really, really closely at this. Look at it. You see that? Do you know what that is? This, my friend, is the one thing that almost killed me. You about something that you may not really be aware of this time of year, and that is if you were going to use a humidifier in order to try to help some sinus infection, some drainage, just overall dryness of the air in your home, you need to be very, 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 very careful.
Was that enough varies for you? I say that kind of commonly in the video, but I'm not sure if that's not the most varies I've ever used in one sentence. But reflecting back, again, not having seen this, I can still remember that to me, this video is very important, and I was certainly very, 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 okay, I'll stop, passionate about it. So let's see what else I said.
If you are a transplant patient, that really comes in because many of these humidifiers, particularly the ones on the cheaper end of the spectrum, oftentimes can contain a lot of bacteria, viruses, spores, molds, whatever, growing inside of them.
Okay, now up front, fact check number one, that's not actually factual. Just because a humidifier or any other product for that matter is cheap or, you know, less expensive does not imply in any means, and I don't think I meant it this way, but doesn't imply in any means that it's going to be filled with bacteria, spores, or viruses. But I kind of know what I meant. Maybe you know what I meant by that. I just mean that, and we'll get to this toward the end if I recall, I just mean that these things can be a little bit more difficult to clean, and maybe they don't have as many safety mechanisms inside of them already built in to help to keep them clean, which ultimately you'll see is going to be what causes my problem.
You may not be aware of. Now, that was certainly true in my life back about, it's been almost 6 years ago now, just a little while post-transplant. My son actually had a little sickness. I don't remember what it was, but he had a fever that night and was coughing, you know, sneezing, whatever. I went in.
Poor guy. He was pretty sick that night. I still remember that. Of course, again, as the way the story plays out, he wasn't nearly as sick as I would eventually get, but you know, hey, you take care of your children. I'd do the same thing if it happened tonight.
In the middle of the night, gave him some ibuprofen to treat his symptoms, and then ended up just kind of sitting in the room with him, you know, petting on him, comforting him, trying to get him back to sleep. Eventually made the mistake of falling asleep myself in the room. Now, worst case scenario, I assumed by that maybe I'd catch whatever bug he had, and then I might be in
Boy, was I wrong.
trouble, but that's not the way it worked out. As a matter of fact, I didn't catch what he had. He got better within a few days. And it was about 2 weeks later, almost to the day, I began to feel a little bit weird. As a matter of fact, I began to notice I was having just a little bit of trouble breathing, wasn't feeling top right, kind of really right, kind of feeling like I had an upper respiratory infection, just overall feeling like trash.
And I still remember that feeling. It's been whatever since 2019. I still remember that feeling. Very few times in my life. Of course, I grew up with all sorts of, you know, medical issues and such, and I've been very sick. I've been a pretty sick puppy many times. but rarely, if ever, in my life do. When I start to get the first symptoms or I get the first kind of tweak that I know something's coming up, do I run off to the doctor. This is one of the cases I remember then. I did run off to the doctor. I'm thankful that I did as the story kind of boils out, but yeah, I don't want to be that sick again.
And called my coordinator, Connie. She immediately told me to come to clinic because, as I've said on the program many times, they kind of serve as my general practitioners. They oversee that, so I don't have to fool.
Now, if you don't realize this, most of you do, you watch the channel all the time, but I am a heart transplant recipient of 2013. So at the time of the video, 9.5 some odd years post heart transplant, being immunosuppressed, anytime anything arises that may be problematic, particularly if I start to spike any kind of fevers, it's always advisable that I go and call, if not go, to my transplant clinic and get some medical treatment. In most cases, I do just what I did back then. I just pick up the phone and call my coordinator, Miss Connie. She's my hero. She's helped me out in so many situations. But I also recommend even now, if you're immunosuppressed, and that could be because of transplant or treatment for things, certain cancers, different things, you do need to be on high alert, extremely high alert, as far as watching out for things and notifying your medical facility or teams or whatever's related to you.
Those other things.
Anytime something arises. Oh, sorry, I hit that too
anyway,
quick.
She told me to go ahead and come into clinic. Immediately they did some blood work, did some chest x-rays, just the general workup they might do cardiologically and some other things. Came back and decided that I had some sort of bacteria, something in my lungs. Okay, now immediately they placed me in the hospital, put me in HT.
Now, that right there was actually found out pretty quickly. Of course, a basic chest x-ray showed something going on. I think they may have done a CT scan within an hour or so and kind of got some better pictures of that, but they knew immediately something was going on. They just, as the story bears out, they can't identify it quite yet.
ICU, heart transplant, intensive care at UAB, just kind of where they stashed us all away when we're there. Put me over to HTICU, began to run some more blood tests, began to wait on those 72-hour cultures, and began to treat me with immediate IV antibiotics. And I was on that.
And that's one of the things I'm thankful with my team over at UAB, and probably the case with most of us as transplant recipients. If and when you do call your coordinators, and if and when they do hospitalize you, they pretty much start immediate care. I'm thankful for that. And in that case, they started IV antibiotics, even though at that point they really didn't have any evidence. They just made the assumption that something was going on. Obviously, I'm not spiking fevers for no good reason, and I'm not feeling like trash for no good reason. So, they went ahead and started those IV antibiotics. And for them, that's pretty much their protocol. I don't know if that's the way with every team. You can comment below and let me know what your team may do in a situation like that. But I'm thankful they did. Again, as the story bears out, that's probably what helped to save my life.
Two very strong antibiotics, one being vancomycin and then another one they mixed in every.
Sorry to interrupt again, but if you've ever been on vancomycin via IV, I hate it, especially if you're on it for long term. And I mean by long term, more than 2 or 3 days. That stuff seems to just burn your veins or eat your veins up. I can remember at times being on vancomycin when in the hospital, when they were having to do it straight IV and not via a PICC line, and they would have to change IV lines out like every day. Typically protocol might be every 3 days. They would have to change or move the IV every single day. And sometimes it would blow within an hour or two. So rough stuff.
I think 4 hours or so, ran on that for a number of days. But the real problem did not come in on that first day when I was admitted. It came in about the second day when I began to spike extremely high fever. As a matter of fact, my fever would go from absolutely normal one moment within 5 to 10 minutes to being 104 or so degrees. And that's...
Now, that is fact. That is absolute fact. And we're not talking about, using $2 thermometer from the dollar store. I'm talking about they would come in to take my temperature in the hospital now with their equipment, the big equipment. They would come in to take it, and they would kind of look at me funny. And I remember the first time or two when they would see those fevers changing like they were, spiking so quickly. I even had one of my nurses that was like, no, that's not right. Let me go back out. Let me get another machine and come in here and check you, because it just didn't seem right to them. It did not seem right to them. But as it turned out, I can remember at one point she had 2 in her hand, and the hand ones that they use with it just hooked to the machine, and one that was on the stand, and they all checked about the same. They were right within within a tenth of a degree of each other. I was really running some fevers, and it was horrible.
Scared them, it certainly scared me. And that's when they really got to digging, clawing, trying to just grasp at any last-ditch effort to try to figure out what was wrong with me. They really couldn't figure it out very much because they were waiting on the cultures to grow out. Now,
yeah, and that's generally the truth. It's just the truth. When you've got some type of bacteria slash, in my case, turned out being a fungus, just that's what it ends up being. But any kind of a virus, bacteria, whatever going on, a lot of times what they will do is pull those cultures, and most of those cultures, not all, but they really don't fully grow out for 72 hours. So what they do over at UAB, at least protocol, I've had this done in other occasions as well, is they'll go ahead and draw the cultures, which are like, cough medicine bottles full of blood. Typically, they'll draw one out of each arm. I guess there's a little different access to something. I'm not sure about that, but they'll draw one out of each arm or multiples out of each arm. Send those off to the lab and grow them out. And they'll usually check them at the 24, 48, and 72 hour marks and kind of give you the information. So they were updating me along the way, but to have a real idea about what's going on, oftentimes those cultures take kind of a minimum of 72 hours. And that even factors in the fact, that's the way to say that UAB has, and most hospitals do, they have their own complete labs. They basically send nothing out, and so they're able to do it in-house, but even still, you still got to wait that time. You got to wait on things to grow out, and that's what they ultimately would do.
Eventually, after spiking those fevers for, I guess, about the first 2 or 3 days while they're constantly pumping in the antibiotics, and by the way, these fevers were so bad, literally, I would be one moment standing over by the air conditioner, nothing but my underwear, gown and all gone, sweating to death, and the next minute be covered up with as many blankets as I could, shivering and shaking so bad I looked like I was having a seizure or convulsions. That's that fever spiking so quickly, and it was...
And again, I'll never forget that. I will never, ever forget that. I probably got some nurses that won't forget that. And they see everything. But, man, I'm telling you what, not just the fact that the fever when they would check it wherever they would, but just my reactions to the fever shocked them because the bed, I would shake till the point the bed would move, and they were bringing in warm blankets, and I think they even brought in some kind of a contraption that blew hot air underneath my covers, and they did everything they could to try to keep me warm and or cool. But still, when these things that spike up and down, my body, I'll never forget it, but I don't really like thinking about it.
We're blown away by it. But it was about that 3rd or 4th day they came in, infectious disease came in my room, told me I had a certain strand of cryptococcus, and you can look that up for yourself. I'll try to link it beneath the video. But
cryptococcal meningitis. Look that up. I'll try to link some things underneath this video. Let you check that out. What you're going to find out is, and again, I think I may mention this later, but what you're really going to find out is if you are not immunosuppressed, this may not even be a big deal. It could be for anybody, but if you're not immunosuppressed, this likely wouldn't happen, and it's probably not even a big deal. Cryptococcal meningitis, if it doesn't go rampant, which is what I was hoping wouldn't happen, and thankfully didn't. But if it doesn't go rampant, you're going to feel like you've got a upper respiratory infection, stuffy nose, some congestion, maybe a cough, that sort of thing. If it's under control, mine eventually would be, but it's not at the point that we're talking in this video. But you can look that up. Cryptococcal meningitis. I may not be saying that right. I'm just an old country boy, so we'll see.
Cryptococcus, which is basically a fungus you can get in your lungs that comes from basically soil and water. And 99% of people...
And bird poop, by the way. Not that I've ever eaten any bird poop in my life, but I have found that out later, and, whatever.
In the world never get that, even though we're exposed to soils and waters all the time outdoors and other places, because they're not immunosuppressed. But because I'm immunosuppressed, and many of you watching this video are as well, we are actually pretty susceptible to such. Now, the cryptococcus disease is extremely dangerous, not just because of what it does to your lungs, but because of the fact that it oftentimes likes to move your lungs into your sinus cavity and then on into your brain. As a matter of fact...
Yeah, and when infectious disease, now this is after a long while, where they kind of got the cultures back, diagnosed this, and really got a handle on it. When the infectious disease guys walked in the first time after the fact and told me about this, that's what they were very clear on. You know, we're not so much worried about this and what it's doing to your lungs, although I was suffering pretty good. But we're worried that this has already gotten to your spinal fluid and maybe to your brain. And if I hadn't said it yet, I'll say it in a moment, I guess. But it can be irreversible at that point. If it gets to that point, it can be irreversible. So I've gone from just in terrible shape to being terrified, I think, if I recall.
I think immediately after finding out what I had, they went ahead and sent in a team that actually did a spinal tap right in the room and to try to determine if it had got in my spinal fluid and was headed to my brain.
First spinal tap I recall in my lifetime, by the way. I'm not sure if that was the case, but for me it was okay. I mean, it was nerve-wracking because I'd heard so many stories about it going bad and, you know, the problems they have and they can't access. Mine went very smoothly, but it was still very nerve-wracking.
The infectious disease doctors told me then, you know, if it gets to your brain, there's kind of no turning this back.
Yeah,
and they were already afraid at that point that this had caused the fungus itself in my lungs, had caused a pneumonia that probably was going to be irreversible. But they got with the CDC. The CDC suggested for them some different type of antibiotics they could try.
Now, reflecting back, I don't know if they got with the CDC or not specifically. Probably general information they had on the cryptococcal meningitis, and then they knew how to treat it. But that was the CDC's and other entities' recommendation. The fact that they swapped some antibiotics around, I think they even stopped the vancomycin, maybe the other. But once they would put me on a different antibiotic that was more pointed at getting to this, that's where you're here in a minute. I started to make some pretty drastic and great improvement.
And really within about 24 hours, the fevers went away and I started feeling much better. But that wasn't the end of the story. The end of the story was that eventually I had to spend 2 solid weeks, so 14, I think it was actually 15 days in the hospital.
Now, I've been in the hospital multiple weeks. This 2 weeks was not my max, but at the time, for dealing with this and as bad as I felt to begin with, it was pretty rough.
Treated with IV antibiotics and such. And then after I got home, I spent 2 years, I said years, not weeks or months, but 2 years on an oral antibiotic I think I took twice a day to try to make sure that the cryptococcus never came back and I didn't have to deal with that lung infection. So
now that's a real point that I haven't ever done a kind of a follow-up video on that. It was 2 years. 2 years I took the antibiotics. For 2 years, I was also in a study to try to identify maybe the causes of this and, you know, what my recovery looked like, to be sure my recovery was complete, to be sure there was no damage, and different things like that. Actually, I did recover fairly quickly, very quickly, actually, to the point that part of my study was, how did he beat this? You know, he's immune suppressed. He's a transplant recipient. He shouldn't have beat this. He shouldn't have beat this at this rate anyway. So I was involved in a 2-year study that included having to take those medications. And then fast forward, this has been, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, time of the video, I actually was in the emergency room sent by my transplant team suspecting that I had the flu. Okay, I suspected I had the flu, and fast forward, I did. It took about 48 hours to determine that finally, but suspecting I had the flu. But at that time, the first doctor that walked in said, we're going to do x-rays and a CT scan and some cultures and maybe some biopsies if we need to be sure this is not that cryptococcus coming back on you from what now's been 6 years ago. So still at risk, I guess. I've got a little bit of scarring, a little bit of shadowing still left from the fungus itself. But even now, they're still concerned about it for whatever reason. So, hey, if it concerned him, it concerned me. And so even as you know, as recent as 3 or 4 weeks ago, I kind of had a secondary panic thinking about this right here.
Nasty, nasty stuff, scary, scary stuff, and you don't want it. Now, you say, well, Jim, what does that have to do with that humidifier you mentioned earlier? Basically, it has everything to do with it, because it was the humidifier that I didn't realize it hadn't been cleaned. You know, you just dump the water out, put it up in storage, you use it again next year kind of thing. It had not been cleaned probably in who knows when, and there was something in it. It was just nasty. That's all you can say about it. It was just nasty, and it needed to be cleaned on a regular basis. And because it wasn't, and I was also immunosuppressed, I fell victim to it. So let me make some.
Now, because the title of this video is I Almost Died, most of the people that watch this video, at least a lot of the people, I shouldn't say most, a lot of the people that watch this video, they think that's just clickbait, and it's not clickbait. I almost died. And so out of the 465,000 people to this point that have watched the video, 52,000 people watch it a month. There were 3,600 people that watched it just yesterday, according to YouTube. Out of all those people, I have a lot of people who will jump in the comments and be pretty abusive. I'll mention that in a moment. Be pretty abusive toward me to say, "Hey, look, this is a fake. This is a fraud." So that's kind of why another reason why I'm doing this. I want to, go back and review it myself, but fact check it. But kind of one of those reasons, because they did eventually. Now I didn't tell it at this point because everything wasn't finished, but they did come back later, and through some testing and different water tests and stuff, they did prove that was the source, that this humidifier was the source of the virus, or of the fungus, I should say. They did kind of connect that and prove that. So a lot of people question that and say, you can't prove it. Well, I can't prove it, but the hospital, the doctors, infectious disease eventually did prove that was a source. So you can imagine how quickly that thing went to the landfill. But let's look at a little bit more.
Suggestions to you. Number one, if you can all afford it, buy you a high quality humidifier. I'm going to link one in the description below here. You can go over. It's an Amazon affiliate link you can check out. I don't really get anything out of it, but you'll get something out of it if you buy it. But it's basically the Honeywell HCM 350W. That's the Honeywell.
Now, I'm not sure that particular humidifier is still available. I have to double check. I have had to change the link a few times because of the model changes and different things. Honeywell does make a good humidifier. And if you look for the ones with the characteristics in it, such as really a warm mist is better because it heats the water more than the cool mist. But try to get one that does have a UV light. Try to get one that looks relatively easy to clean, that you can kind of take apart completely. That's a big deal. It was the cracks and crevices where this stuff was swimming around. And so even though I kind of will say in the video I didn't clean it, it's not that I never cleaned it by any means. It's just the fact I didn't clean it well, and I wasn't looking in the cracks and crevices to try to get to the bottom of where little things could be hiding.
HCM 350W. Again, link in the description. Go over and check it out. It's about $68 time of this video, so just a little bit higher than maybe the typical ones that I've used in the past.
I would probably pay $168 right now for one if I were going to use one. Again, I'd use some different criteria, probably a warm mist, the best quality, the best brand I could find. I actually have reviewed a few since then that I kind of recommend. I can drop in the links below, as well as some of those reviews, as a matter of fact, you can watch. But I would be very cautious nonetheless.
But it actually has a wicking system where the water is drawn up through a wick type of system that pulls it up, so it's not drawing water straight out of the reservoir itself. And then on top,
I have double checked and fact checked that. That is pretty accurate. Again, warm mist over cool mist, yes, but a wicking system is better, provided you're willing to change those wicks out pretty regularly. It is better from that perspective, because I don't know if there's some kind of filtration that comes just the fact that it's wicked or whatever, but the evaporation process, I don't know. Maybe I don't have any idea how, but it does seem to be better from the evidence I found.
Of that, it's got a UV light that shines over the wick and kind of cleans out and potentially kills a lot. It claims 99 point something% of the bacteria and viruses and whatever's in there. I don't understand that, but kills all the gunk in there before the mist comes out.
Did you like that technical term, gunk? That's just the best I can do, folks. It's just gunk to me. That's all it really is.
So it's a high quality type product. It's a product that's going to give you a lot cleaner mist into the room. But then even then, keep in mind to go along by their suggested manufacturer's instructions on how to clean that. Generally, that has to do with cleaning them with a solution of about 32 ounces of water, and I think it's like a half a cup of either Clorox or vinegar, not both, but one or the other, and putting it inside the tank, the reservoir, swishing it around. I even take and plug mine in for a minute and letting the mist just run through the whole system. I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do, but I do.
Still pretty good advice. I've had a lot of people in the comments below that older video that have made some other suggestions, different things. People said put the little fish in there that floats, that cleans it. I can't say that does anything, but hey, I'm willing to try anything. But several suggestions that have been as far as people saying put a little drop or two of hydrogen peroxide and maybe a little bit of Clorox in the water. Not sure how safe it is. I'm not recommending that, but people have suggested a number of things. And the main bottom line, buy a high quality product, keep it clean. I think that's the key. And don't be immunosuppressed like I was. So you may not be as nearly susceptible as I would be.
That I'm just very, very cautious about it now. And thankfully, here I am 6 or so years later. I'm doing fine. I haven't had a secondary
Almost 9 years, by the way.
event, but it scared me to death. So yeah, this product, it nearly killed me. I just wanted to share that with you, those of you who hadn't heard me tell that story before, and remind you that if you're going to do that, you could probably buy a safer product, but be sure no matter what, you clean it, clean it, clean it. And my final suggestion here at the end is, if you're not going to want that cool mist all the time, and sometimes we just need a little boost of our the humidity in our homes to just kind of make all this stuff feel better and operate better, I suggest putting a pot of water on the stove and letting it boil out for 30 minutes or so.
Some high quality B-roll right there, boy. Shot with an iPhone and a shaky hand that was on prednisone back then.
Keep an eye on it, but let a pot of water boil on the stove. You'll increase the humidity in your house quite a bit, at least on that floor. And maybe that'll do the trick. You won't have to bother with the humidifiers and such. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope.
Yeah, so was this video a fraud? Absolutely not. Was it factual? There were a few areas, One, the humidifier itself, just the fact that I had a humidifier and a certain brand didn't kill me, or didn't try to kill me. Nothing killed me. I wouldn't be talking, right? But it didn't. It's not what caused my near-death experience. But, anything that you don't diligently clean, you don't diligently stay on top of, and particularly if there's water involved, humidity, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. So do I overall recommend a immunosuppressed person post-transplant like you and I patient use a humidifier of any kind? Really, I don't. I really don't. And I've got a number of companies that have sponsored me to make reviews on humidifiers, and hey, they paid me to do it. And I gave honest reviews nonetheless, but do I say run out and buy one of those? Probably not. If you're immunosuppressed, be overly cautious, watch out what you're doing, but keep clean. So the video, no, it's not fake. I almost died. It was a horrible, horrible situation. I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I don't want to go through it again, at least. But at the same time, not quite factual. Just, the product that I'm holding up, where did that go? Let me see if I can put that back up. That product right there, that one right there, what the Vicks, hey, one's good as another. I will say that model is pretty difficult to clean, though. It is pretty difficult to clean. So it's not that specific model. That is the model that caused my problem. But it's not a danger that's innate in that specific model. It's just one that's innate in the fact that, hey, if you're just not real good at cleaning stuff out or not diligent in cleaning, you could have a problem. So I've not done one of these before. It's been a long time since I've seen that video right there. It's almost embarrassing. I've grown my hair out a lot, haven't I? I wear glasses now. Things have changed, but glad to sit down and kind of go back over that. I don't think this is really important to you, but it's probably a little bit entertaining. But fact check. That's what this world's about now, is the fact check. So why not fact check my own videos? I hope you've enjoyed this, if for nothing more than entertainment purposes. If you've had any experience with a humidifier and it causing some upper respiratory infections, a lot of times what I hear in the comments is people will say, well, I use a humidifier and it seems like I get sicker. It's actually possible. It's actually possible. Even if it doesn't turn into what I was dealing with, they can within themselves cause some upper respiratory infections when they're not properly cleaned. And so, yeah, that's a fact. Now, as far as if you're ever on that particular video and you start seeing ugly, mean comments, most of them are directed toward me. They'll say, oh, you're an idiot. You're stupid. You didn't clean it. Hey, like water off a duck's back. I'm not sweating it at all, because the people who watch that video, who comment, and thumbs down, whatever, Hey, I'll be honest with you, they make me money every day. They make me money. That's one of the few videos I have monetized that make money, and those 465,000 views have made me some money through the years. Not a ton, but pennies a day maybe. But hey, I get a few dollars out of that one. So keep watching it. It's a good video, and it is good information nonetheless. Until next time, stay stronger, my friends.